The morning of April 13th, 1944. South China Sea, approximately 60 miles northeast of Cape Padaran, French Indochina. You are standing in the conning tower of the USS Flasher, submarine number 249, and through the periscope lens you are watching what appears to be an impossibility. 7 Japanese cargo vessels steamed in formation, flanked by 4 destroyers and 2 submarine chasers. A convoy designated High 52 by American Naval Intelligence. The kind of target that wins wars. The kind that also kills submarines. Commander Reuben T. Whitaker stands beside you, wire-rimmed glasses catching the dim red light of the conning tower. He has been tracking this convoy for 6 hours, long enough that the plotting paper is covered in pencil marks showing speed calculations, tide adjustments, moon phase considerations. The air in here tastes like recycled breath and machine oil. Somewhere below, in the torpedo room, 8 men wait beside loaded tubes, their hands resting on firing mechanisms. They've rehearsed 10,000 times in training and perhaps 20 times in actual combat. The question that will define the next 12 months hangs unspoken in this cramped steel cylinder. How does one submarine, carrying only 24 torpedoes, sink more enemy tonnage than entire wolf packs? How does a single vessel commanded by a soft-spoken officer from Virginia become the deadliest submarine in United States naval history, achieving a record so statistically improbable that Japanese intelligence will refuse to believe it came from a single boat? The answer begins not with aggression, but with patience. Not with heroics, but with mathematics. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. To understand what makes the Flasher's accomplishment nearly impossible, you must first understand the arithmetic of submarine warfare in the Pacific theater. A Gato-class submarine, which is what Flasher is, carries 24 Mark 14 torpedoes. Each torpedo costs approximately $10,000 in 1943 currency, weighs 3,200 pounds, and has a theoretical range of 4,500 yards at high-speed settings. The Mark 14 has been plagued with problems since the war's beginning: faulty depth controls that send torpedoes running too deep beneath their targets, magnetic exploders that detonate prematurely or not at all, contact exploders so poorly designed they sometimes fail on perpendicular hits. By April of 1944, most of these problems had been corrected through field modifications that the Bureau of Ordnance in Washington initially refused to authorize. Submarine commanders in the Pacific have essentially redesigned the Navy's primary submarine weapon through trial, error, and the kind of desperate innovation that comes from watching torpedoes malfunction while depth charges are falling on your head. The typical war patrol lasts 50 to 60 days. Doctrine suggests that a submarine operating alone in enemy waters might sink 4 to 6 ships if conditions are favorable, if the torpedoes function, if the escorts are not too vigilant, if luck holds. The most successful submarines in the Pacific Fleet boats like USS Wahoo, USS Tang, USS Silversides are achieving records of 10 to 15 confirmed kills over multiple patrols. These are considered exceptional performances, the work of aggressive commanders willing to take calculated risks. Commander Whitaker does not fit the profile of a successful submarine captain. He is 31 years old, a 1934 graduate of the United States Naval Academy, class rank undistinguished. Before the war, he served on surface vessels. He wears glasses, speaks softly, and possesses none of the swaggering confidence that characterizes officers like Commander Dudley "Mush" Morton of the Despentit, Wahoo, or Commander Richard O'Kane of the Tang. His crew, during his first weeks in command, privately wonders if they have been assigned a captain who lacks the killer instinct necessary for submarine warfare. They are wrong, but they will not understand why until much later. The USS Flasher was commissioned on September 25, 1943, at the Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. She is 311 feet 9 inches long, displaces 1,526 tons surfaced, carries a crew complement of 80 officers and men in spaces designed for 60. Her interior is a maze of pipes, valves, electrical panels, and machinery crammed into a pressure hull 27 feet in diameter. There are no private spaces except for the captain's cabin, which is roughly the size of a broom closet. Officers sleep in bunks stacked 3 high. Enlisted men sleep in the torpedo rooms, between the weapons or hot rack, by sharing bunks in shifts. The temperature inside rarely drops below 90 degrees. The air is perpetually humid, smelling of diesel fuel, cooking oil, unwashed bodies, and the peculiar metallic scent of recycled atmosphere. Fresh water is severely rationed, 1 bucket per man per week for bathing, assuming the evaporators are functioning. The toilets, which use high-pressure air to blow waste overboard, require a complex procedure to operate and can only be used when the submarine is at shallow depths. Men develop rashes, fungal infections, heat exhaustion. The pharmacist's mate dispenses aspirin for everything from headaches to heartbreak. This is the environment in which 80 men will live for 2 months at a time, hunting an enemy that controls the entire ocean surface. Whittaker assumed command of Flasher for her 3rd war patrol in December of 1943. The boat has completed 2 patrols under her previous commander with respectable but unremarkable results. 5 ships sunk, 2 damaged. Whittaker inherits a crew that is competent but skeptical. Submarine crews develop intense loyalty to their commanders, but that loyalty must be earned through demonstrated competence under conditions where mistakes equal death. His first patrol as captain is a learning experience for everyone involved. Operating off the coast of French Indochina, Whittaker spends days observing Japanese convoy routes, timing their movements, noting the patterns of escort behavior. He carries a notebook in which he records everything: the interval between course changes by merchant captains, the search patterns employed by destroyers after a submarine sighting, the correlation between moon phase and convoy timing. His officers watch him fill page after page with calculations and wonder when they are actually going to shoot at something. When he finally attacks, it is not with the aggressive surface actions favoured by some commanders, nor with the long-range shots that others prefer. Whittaker takes the Flasher in close, positioning her at 400 yards from the target track. At this range, the margin for error is measured in seconds. If the torpedoes are spotted early, if a destroyer happens to look in the wrong direction at the wrong moment, the Flasher will be caught on the surface or at periscope depth with insufficient time to dive to safety. But at 400 yards, even the problematic Mark 14 torpedo cannot miss. The geometry of the shot becomes almost trivial. The target appears so large in the periscope lens that hitting it is like shooting a barn from inside the barn. 2 freighters from that first engagement explode and sink within minutes. The escorts scatter in confusion, dropping depth charges on the wrong bearing. The Flasher slips away at creep speed, her electric motors making barely enough noise to be distinguished from the background ocean. In his patrol report, Whittaker writes a single sentence that will become his tactical philosophy: close as approach eliminates variables. But it is during the 4th war patrol, beginning in April of 1944, that mathematics becomes art. The strategic situation in the Pacific at this moment favors submarines in ways that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. The Japanese merchant marine is collapsing under the weight of American submarine warfare. In 1942, Japanese shipping could move raw materials from the southern resource area, the conquered territories of Southeast Asia, rich in oil, rubber, tin, rice, back to the home islands with reasonable confidence. By 1944, the journey has become a calculated gamble with death. American submarines are sinking Japanese merchant vessels faster than Japanese shipyards can replace them. The tonnage loss curve crosses the tonnage replacement curve in March of 1944, and from that point forward, Japan's ability to sustain its war economy begins an irreversible decline. Every tanker that fails to deliver oil from Borneo means Japanese aircraft cannot fly. Every cargo ship that sinks carrying rice from Indochina means rations shrink in Tokyo. Every transport torpedoed in the South China Sea is troops who will never reinforce the Philippines. The Japanese Navy understands this arithmetic perfectly well. They respond by organizing merchant vessels into heavily escorted convoys, routing them through waters they believe safer, scheduling movements to minimize exposure to known submarine patrol areas. They establish air patrols along the convoy routes. They position submarine chasers at choke points. They develop increasingly sophisticated anti-submarine tactics. And into this increasingly dangerous environment sails Commander Whittaker and the USS Flasher. The convoy designated High 52 consists of 7 cargo vessels ranging from 4,000 to 10,000 tons. 4 destroyers provide escort, veteran warships with experienced crews who have hunted submarines before. 2 submarine chasers add additional patrol coverage. The convoy is following a route along the coast of Indochina that offers relatively shallow water, limiting a submarine's ability to dive deep to escape depth charges. Whittaker has been tracking them since dawn. He surfaces the Flasher periodically to update his position and gain speed, then submerges well before the convoy's air patrol schedule suggests an aircraft might appear. He is calculating not just where the convoy is, but where it will be in 6 hours when darkness falls and conditions favor attack. His approach begins at dusk on April 13th. The Flasher submerges to periscope depth and begins creeping toward the convoy's projected track. This is the most dangerous phase, moving slowly enough to remain quiet, yet quickly enough to reach an attack position before the opportunity passes. The crew goes to battle stations. The torpedo room reports tubes 1 through 6 flooded and ready. The plotting party in the conning tower begins generating firing solutions based on estimated target speed, bearing, and range. At 600 yards, Whittaker can see individual details on the merchant ships through the periscope. Rust streaks on hulls, crewmen visible on deck, cargo booms, the configuration of each vessel. He can also see the destroyers, their silhouettes sharp against the twilight sky, moving in their patrol patterns around the convoy perimeter. Standard doctrine says shoot from this range. 600 yards is close enough for high hit probability, far enough for escape. But Whittaker has studied the escort patterns for hours. He knows that in 3 minutes, the nearest destroyer will be on the far side of the convoy, its sonar masked by the noise of merchant vessel propellers. He knows that the convoy will make its scheduled course change in 2 minutes, presenting a better angle for a spread of torpedoes to strike multiple ships. He waits, 500 yards. The tension in the conning tower is becoming physical. Men are breathing shallow, their muscles locked. The executive officer's hand hovers near the firing solution panel, ready to transmit the attack data to the torpedo room. 400 yards. This is inside the range where destroyers can ram a submarine if they spot it. This is the range where depth charges need not be particularly well aimed to cause catastrophic damage. Whittaker's voice cuts through the silence. Standby tubes 1 through 4. Match bearings. Fire 1. The submarine shudders slightly as compressed air ejects the first torpedo. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. 4 torpedoes, each set to run at 10 feet depth, spread across a 70-degree arc to ensure at least one will hit even if the target maneuvers. The weapons run at 46 knots, closing the distance to their targets in approximately 40 seconds. Take her down. Rig for depth charge. Rig for silent running. All ahead full. The Flasher's bow tilts down. The deck plates tilt beneath your feet. Men grab stanchions to keep their balance. The boat descends through the thermal layers, heading for 200 feet, then 250. Every piece of non-essential equipment is shut down. The ventilation stops. The temperature begins climbing immediately. At precisely 62 seconds after firing, the first explosion hammers through the water. The second follows 3 seconds later. Then the third and fourth, overlapping, a continuous thunder that you feel in your chest cavity and your inner ear and the roots of your teeth. 4 hits out of 4 torpedoes. The statistical probability of this, given Mark 14 reliability rates, is approximately 60%. Whittaker has just beaten the odds. But the celebration lasts approximately 5 seconds, because now comes the part that training cannot adequately prepare you for, the part where the ocean tries to crush you like an aluminum can. The first depth charge sounds distant, a muffled thump that rattles loose objects. The second is closer, the lights flicker. The third is close enough that paint chips fall from the overhead. Then they come in a cascade, overlapping, disorienting, the hull flexing in ways that steel should not flex, creating sounds that your brain categorizes as the precursor to structural failure. The Japanese escorts have established a search pattern that naval intelligence will later describe as textbook anti-submarine warfare. They form a grid, systematically collapsing the potential hiding space into zones of statistical death. Each destroyer carries between 40 and 60 depth charges. They are not dropping them randomly. They are dropping them in calculated patterns designed to force the submarine either into shallower water where it can be spotted or deeper water where the pressure will do what the explosives cannot. Whittaker takes the Flasher to 300 feet. This is approaching the design limit of the Gato-class pressure hull, which is rated for 300 feet operational depth with a theoretical crush depth somewhere beyond 500 feet. At 300 feet, the pressure gauges show readings that make engineers nervous. Every rivet, every weld, every penetration through the hull becomes a potential failure point bearing hundreds of pounds per square inch of external pressure. The depth charge attacks continue. 14 destroyers, this is what the sonar operator counts, which seems impossible, but the sound profiles are distinct. 14 warships hunting 1 submarine, systematically eliminating hiding spaces through pure geometric logic. In the forward torpedo room, a seal begins leaking. Not catastrophically, but enough that a thin stream of seawater arcs across the compartment, hissing like a living thing. The damage control party plugs it with wooden wedges and rags, but everyone in that space understands that the hull is beginning to yield under the pressure. One man vomits into a bucket. No one comments on it. Fear is not shameful when it is rational. Whittaker does something that violates every instinct and most of the tactical manual. He orders the Flasher to turn directly toward the nearest destroyer and proceed ahead slowly. The helmsman repeats the order back, his voice cracking on the last word, certain he has misheard. But Whittaker's mathematics is correct. The Japanese destroyers are searching far, not near. Their sonar is calibrated to detect submarines at range, where they have time to maneuver for attack. At close range, the destroyer's own propeller noise and hull signature overwhelm the sensitive hydrophones. The closest approach becomes the safest space, the eye of the hurricane. For 90 seconds, the USS Flasher glides underneath a Japanese destroyer at a depth of 280 feet, moving at less than 3 knots. The crew can hear the destroyer's propellers through the hull, a rhythmic thrashing directly overhead. They can hear machinery noise, the metallic sounds of depth charges being loaded into their racks and rolled toward the launching rails. One sailor closes his eyes and mouths a prayer. The pharmacist's mate moves through the boat with his medical kit, checking on men who are approaching the limits of heat exhaustion and oxygen deprivation. Then they are through. The destroyer continues on its search pattern, dropping charges on water the Flasher vacated 2 minutes earlier. Whittaker takes the boat down to 400 feet beyond all recommended limits, into the realm where every creak and groan of the hull sounds like impending implosion and goes completely silent. Silent running is a term that sounds more romantic than its reality. It means shutting down everything that makes noise: ventilation systems, cooling pumps, unnecessary electrical equipment. It means the temperature climbs from 90 degrees to 100 degrees, to 110 degrees, to 120 degrees. It means the air becomes viscous with carbon dioxide, and men begin exhibiting symptoms of hypoxia. confusion, euphoria, visual disturbances, loss of motor control. It means you might survive the depth charges only to suffocate in your own submarine. The Flasher remains at 400 feet for 19 hours. This figure will appear in Whittaker's patrol report and will be read with skepticism by officers at Subpac headquarters, who wonder if it is a typographical error. 19 hours at depth beyond design limits, with minimal air circulation, while Japanese destroyers systematically search the waters above. The pharmacist's mate moves through the boat with portable oxygen bottles, administering brief inhalations to men who are showing signs of carbon dioxide poisoning. The carbon dioxide scrubbers, chemical systems designed to remove the gas from the recycled atmosphere, are operating at maximum capacity and are barely adequate. The chemical absorbent material turns from white to purple to dark brown, indicating saturation. At hour 15, they begin replacing the absorbent, a process that requires careful handling of caustic chemicals in near darkness while the deck tilts beneath your feet. At hour 17, a sailor in the after battery compartment loses consciousness. His bunkmate notices only because the man stops snoring. The pharmacist's mate forces oxygen into his lungs using a manual resuscitator, squeezing the bag in rhythmic compressions while another sailor monitors the unconscious man's pulse. After 3 minutes, he begins breathing on his own again. No one comments on this incident. It is simply noted, managed, and then everyone returns to waiting. At hour 22, the sonar operator reports that the destroyer propeller sounds are fading. Not disappearing, you can still hear them, but moving away, their bearing changing in a pattern that suggests the search is expanding outward rather than remaining concentrated. At hour 23, Whittaker gives the order that everyone has been waiting for, blow negative to the mark, surface, all ahead standard. The Flasher rises from 400 feet like a whale breaching. When the hatch opens and tropical air floods the interior, 3 men on deck watch immediately collapse, their bodies simply giving out now that survival no longer requires constant vigilance. The lookouts report debris fields stretching to the horizon, floating wreckage, oil slicks, cargo containers, the corpses of the convoy they killed 23 hours earlier. Whittaker climbs to the bridge, removes his glasses, cleans them carefully with a cloth that is damp with sweat and humidity. He surveys the destruction through binoculars, methodically noting the types of debris for his patrol report. Behind those wire-rimmed lenses, his eyes show no particular emotion. He is already calculating the next move, the next convoy, the next geometric problem to solve. The executive officer joins him on the bridge, gulping air like a drowning man. "Sir," he says when he can speak, that was the finest piece of ship handling I've ever witnessed." Whittaker does not respond to the compliment. Instead, he says, "Note the position, transmit it in clear. The Japanese should be allowed to recover their survivors. This is not standard procedure. Transmitting in clear means broadcasting without code, which gives away your position to any listening station." The executive officer starts to question the order, then stops. Every man on the Flasher has just experienced 19 hours of mechanized hunting, and they understand at a visceral level what it means to be prey. Whittaker is reminding them, and perhaps himself, that there is a difference between efficient killing and cruelty. The patrol continues. The Flasher is on day 38 of a scheduled 50-day patrol. She has expended 20 torpedoes and officially sunk 9 ships, with several more damaged or possibly sunk. This already qualifies as a highly successful patrol. Standard procedure would be to use the remaining 4 torpedoes conservatively, perhaps against a single high-value target, and then return to base. On May 4th, 1944, sonar reports multiple contacts. Whittaker spends 3 hours trailing them, slowly closing range while remaining undetected. What emerges through patient observation is a Japanese task force, the seaplane carrier Kamoi, 2 fleet oilers, 4 cargo vessels, and their escorts. Whitaker calls his officers to the wardroom for a council of war. They crowd into the small space, reviewing the plot board that shows the enemy formation. The tactical problem is obvious. They have 4 torpedoes remaining. Even if every torpedo achieves a hit, statistically unlikely, they cannot possibly sink the entire task force. The executive officer articulates what everyone is thinking. Sir, we let them pass and find a softer target. Whitaker studies the plot. The convoy is a priority target, a vessel capable of supporting seaplane operations that extend Japanese reconnaissance hundreds of miles. The 2 oilers are carrying fuel that could keep Japanese carriers at sea for weeks. The cargo ships are likely transporting reinforcements toward the Philippines, where American forces are preparing for invasion. We attack, Whitaker says. Fire tubes 1 and 2 at the carrier, tubes 3 and 4 at the lead oiler. And after that, sir? After that, we surface and use the deck gun. The deck gun. The 4-inch, 50 caliber cannon mounted on the Flasher's forward deck, designed primarily for finishing off crippled merchant ships at close range, not for engaging task forces that can shoot back and call for reinforcements. The attack begins at dusk. The Flasher approaches 800 yards longer range than Whitaker prefers, but necessary to give them time to reload if the first torpedoes miss. He does not expect to miss. The firing solution is precise, the target's course, steady, the sea state calm. Fire 1, fire 2, pause, fire 3, fire 4. 4 torpedoes, the last weapons in the Flasher's forward tubes. They run true. The first hits the convoy amidships, the explosion tearing a hole in the carrier's engineering spaces. The second torpedo hits forward, opening the bow to flooding. The lead oiler takes 1 torpedo in the engine room and breaks in half, the 2 sections separating with the grinding screech of tearing metal that carries for miles underwater. Surface. Man the deck gun. The Flasher broaches into twilight. The deck gun crew scrambles topside, following procedures they have practiced hundreds of times but never expected to actually execute in combat. The gun captain trains the weapon on the nearest cargo ship, now approximately 3,000 yards distant and visible against the darkening sky. The first round is low, creating a waterspout short of the target. The second round hits the waterline. The third, fourth, and fifth rounds walk up the superstructure, smashing through thin hull plating, demolishing the bridge structure, starting fires in cargo holds. The gun crew loads and fires with mechanical efficiency. Load, close breach, aim, fire, open breach, extract casing, repeat. 47 rounds in 8 minutes, an average rate of fire that exceeds the weapon's theoretical capability. They put shells into 4 different vessels, aiming for waterlines and engineering spaces where damage will be catastrophic rather than merely spectacular. 1 cargo ship is listing badly, her deck awash. Another is circling with no apparent control, her steering mechanism destroyed. A third is burning from multiple fires. The fourth is attempting to flee at maximum speed, which only makes her an easier target. The splashes from near misses help the gun crew refine their aim. Then the lookout sees it. Smoke on the horizon. Multiple sources. The escorts are returning and they are bringing friends. Secure the deck gun. Clear the bridge. Dive, dive, dive. The gun crew has 45 seconds to secure the weapon and get below before the hatches seal. They move with controlled panic, stowing equipment, clearing brass casings, abandoning anything that cannot be secured immediately. 1 sailor slips on the wet deck, his feet going out from under him. 2 others grab him, 1 arm each, and physically throw him toward the conning tower hatch. He disappears into the opening with a yelp of surprise and pain as he hits the ladder wrong, but he is inside, which is all that matters. The chief of the boat is securing the main induction valve when the first shells from the Japanese escorts begin landing. They are long-range shots, poorly aimed, but the splashes are uncomfortably close. He dogs the hatch shut and drops down the ladder just as the boat begins her dive angle. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The Flasher goes deep again. The geometry of death resumes. Depth charges falling in patterns, the hull groaning under pressure, men waiting in darkness while mathematics determines their survival. This time, the attack lasts only 4 hours before the escorts give up the search. Perhaps they are low on depth charges. Perhaps they need to protect the surviving merchant ships. Perhaps they simply conclude that no submarine could have survived their barrage. When the Flasher surfaces again at midnight, the ocean is quiet. Debris fields mark where ships died. Oil slicks shimmer under starlight. The task force is gone, scattered or sunk. The gun crew reports that the deck gun's barrel is hot enough to cause burns, and they will need to perform maintenance before it can be fired again. In his patrol report, Whittaker will write with characteristic understatement, "Conducted surface gun action against enemy task force. Results considered satisfactory. Naval intelligence will confirm 9 ships sunk or damaged in this engagement." Combined with earlier actions during the patrol, the Flasher's 4th war patrol will be recorded as the single most successful submarine patrol in United States Navy history to that point. 15 ships sunk or damaged, totaling over 70,000 tons. Whittaker receives the Navy Cross, one of the highest decorations for valor. The crew receives 2 weeks of liberty in Pearl Harbor and a new reputation. Other submarine crews begin calling them Whittaker's Wolves, though the nickname puzzles Whittaker, who does not consider his tactics particularly aggressive. But the Flasher is not finished. The 5th War Patrol, beginning in August of 1944, adds another 6 confirmed kills. The methods remain consistent: patient tracking, close approach, precise firing solutions, and aggressive evasion. Whittaker refines his techniques, incorporating lessons from each engagement. He begins keeping detailed notes on Japanese escort behavior, documenting how different types of warships respond to submarine attacks. These notes will eventually be compiled and distributed to other submarine commanders, becoming part of the institutional knowledge of the silent service. By December of 1944, the Pacific War was entering its terminal phase. American forces have recaptured the Philippines. B-29 bombers are striking the Japanese home islands from bases in the Marianas. The Japanese merchant marine is in collapse, its tonnage losses exceeding replacement capability by a factor of 5 to 1. Merchant ships are sailing alone or in small, desperate groups, taking whatever routes they hope might avoid the submarine patrols that now dominate every major shipping lane. The Flasher's 6th War Patrol begins on December 4, 1944. By this point, Whittaker's reputation has spread throughout the submarine force. He is considered one of the most successful commanders in the Pacific, mentioned in the same breath as legendary captains like O'Kane, Morton, and Fluckey. But Whittaker remains uncomfortable with hero worship. He insists that his success is merely the application of sound mathematical principles to tactical problems. On December 21, 1944, off Cam Ranh Bay in French Indochina, the Flasher makes contact with what appears to be the opportunity of a lifetime, a convoy consisting of 4 tankers, 2 destroyers, and an escort carrier. It is the kind of target that can change the strategic balance in an entire theatre of operations, because those tankers are carrying oil that the Japanese Navy desperately needs, and that escort carrier represents air power that can protect convoys or support island garrisons. It is also the kind of target that kills submarines. Escort carriers carry anti-submarine aircraft. Their destroyers are veteran ships whose crews have hunted submarines for years. The convoy is sailing in relatively shallow water, where a submarine's depth options are limited. Whittaker observes them for 6 hours. His officers expect the usual pattern: patient tracking, waiting for ideal conditions, the eventual close approach. But as the sun sets on December 21st, Whittaker makes a decision that surprises everyone. He is going to attack immediately, in twilight, when visibility still favors the surface ships. His reasoning is mathematical. The convoy is heading toward Cam Ranh Bay, where it will enter protected waters with additional escort coverage. If they wait for full darkness, they will lose the opportunity entirely. If they attack now, they can use the twilight to obscure their periscope wake while still having enough light for accurate targeting. The approach takes 2 hours of careful maneuvering, positioning the Flasher to intercept the convoy's track while remaining undetected. At 600 yards, Whittaker begins firing. Not the usual spread of 4 or 6 torpedoes, he fires a 10-torpedo salvo, every weapon in the forward and aft tubes, released in a carefully timed sequence designed to arrive at the targets in overlapping waves. 10 torpedoes represent nearly half the Flasher's entire weapons load. If they miss, the patrol is effectively over, but Whittaker has spent 6 hours calculating angles, speeds, and bearings. He is betting everything on mathematics. The first explosion comes 62 seconds after firing. A tanker hit amidships. Then a cascade of detonations, overlapping, the sounds merging into continuous thunder. Through the periscope, Whittaker watches as 3 tankers erupt in flames, their cargoes of oil igniting in fireballs that illuminate the twilight like false dawn. The escort carrier Unyo takes a torpedo in the stern, her flight deck buckling, aircraft sliding into the water. Take her deep, right full rudder. All ahead full. The Flasher begins her dive, but something is wrong. The sonar operator's voice cuts through the controlled chaos. "Sir," the carrier. She's turning toward us. She's attempting to ram. The Unyo, mortally wounded but not yet dead, has identified the Flasher's position from the torpedo wakes. 9,000 tons of dying warship is turning at 12 knots, intending to ram the submarine before she can dive to safety. Whittaker has perhaps 3 seconds to make a decision that will determine whether 80 men live or die. He can surface and attempt to outrun the carrier, unlikely to succeed, and it would expose them to gunfire from the destroyers. He can turn and try to evade, also unlikely at this shallow depth and slow speed. Or he can do the only thing that mathematics suggests might work: dive as deep as possible and hope the carrier's hull passes over them with enough clearance. 500 feet, emergency dive. All ahead flank. 500 feet is well beyond the Flasher's rated depth. At 500 feet, the external pressure is approximately 220 pounds per square inch. Every rivet, every weld, every seal in the hull is experiencing forces that exceed design specifications. The hull begins making sounds that are difficult to describe if you have not heard them. Groans, creaks, metallic pings that might be rivets failing or might just be steel flexing under impossible loads. The carrier passes overhead. The propeller noise is so loud it overwhelms the Flasher's sonar. You can hear the carrier's hull scraping through the water, hear machinery sounds, hear for one impossible moment what might be human voices shouting on the carrier's deck. The propellers miss the Flasher's sail by an estimated 20 feet. 20 feet separating a successful attack from a catastrophic collision that would have sent both vessels to the bottom. Then the carrier is past, and she is sinking. The Unyo goes down with 1,200 men aboard, her hull torn open by torpedo damage and the stress of her final maneuver. The tankers are burning, spreading oil slicks across miles of ocean. One destroyer is damaged, possibly by debris or a secondary explosion. The convoy that was supposed to deliver vital fuel to the Japanese Navy has instead become a funeral pyre visible from the mainland. The Flasher remains at 500 feet for another hour, moving away from the attack site at creep speed while the remaining destroyers conduct their search. When she finally surfaces well after midnight, the crew finds an ocean transformed into an apocalyptic landscape of burning oil, floating wreckage, and the distant silhouettes of rescue vessels attempting to save survivors. Whittaker stands on the bridge, methodically recording observations for his patrol report. The executive officer watches him. This soft-spoken man with wire-rimmed glasses who has just orchestrated one of the most devastating single attacks of the Pacific Submarine War, and wonders what thoughts occupy that precise, mathematical mind. Later, alone in his cabin, Whittaker will write a passage that does not appear in his official patrol report, but which survives in his personal papers. We have become efficient killers. Our torpedoes strike with mathematical precision. Our tactics exploit enemy weaknesses with cold logic. But we should not forget what we are killing. Men who serve their nation as we serve ours, who have families waiting for them as we have families waiting for us. Efficiency in warfare is necessary. Taking pleasure in it is not. The USS Flasher returned to Pearl Harbor on January 26, 1945. She has been at sea for 53 days. Her crew looks like concentration camp survivors, gaunt, hollow-eyed, moving with the careful deliberation of men whose bodies have been pushed to physiological limits. They have lost an average of 15 pounds per man. Several require medical attention for heat exhaustion, fungal infections, and malnutrition. The patrol report lists 4 tankers sunk, 1 escort carrier sunk, 1 destroyer damaged. Naval intelligence confirms the kills, and later revises the estimate upward when additional evidence becomes available. Combined with earlier patrols, the Flasher's total now stands at 21 confirmed ships sunk, totaling over 100,000 tons, the highest confirmed tonnage of any United States submarine in World War II, 21 confirmed kills. But the actual number is almost certainly higher. The chaos of submarine warfare makes accurate accounting nearly impossible. Ships reported as damaged often sink hours or days later, beyond the submarine's observation. Kills are sometimes attributed to the wrong boat when multiple submarines operate in the same area. Japanese records, when they survive at all, often contradict American claims. Post-war analysis suggests that the Flasher may have sunk or contributed to the sinking of as many as 30 to 40 vessels when unconfirmed kills and shared credits are included. This number will never be definitively established. The ocean keeps its secrets, and many Japanese merchant ships simply vanished during the war, their fates unknown even to their own navy. What can be stated with certainty is that over 12 months of combat operations, from April of 1944 through January of 1945, one submarine commanded by a soft-spoken officer from Virginia achieved a record of destruction that Japanese naval intelligence initially refused to believe came from a single vessel. Their analysis of attack patterns, timing, and locations led them to conclude they were facing a coordinated wolf pack, probably 3 or 4 submarines operating under unified command. They designated this phantom group the Flasher Pack and diverted substantial resources to hunting it. Additional destroyer escorts, aerial patrols, sonar nets, even minefields placed in waters where the pack was believed to operate. At one point, 14 destroyers were assigned specifically to anti-submarine operations in South China Sea, all hunting what they believed to be a multi-boat threat. There was no pack. There was 1 submarine, 80 men, and mathematics. The question that naval historians still debate is why Whittaker's approach proved so effective when it violated conventional wisdom about aggressive submarine warfare. Officers like Dudley Morton and Richard O'Kane earned fame for bold surface attacks, for taking risks that made for dramatic patrol reports. Whittaker's reports read like engineering documents, precise, methodical, emotionally flat. The answer lies perhaps in understanding what submarine warfare actually is beneath the romance and propaganda. It is not a game of courage against cowardice. It is a mathematical contest between geometry, physics, and probability. The submarine that strikes from close range with precise targeting hits more often than the submarine that fires from safe distance with uncertain solutions. The submarine that evades through careful calculation survives more often than the submarine that relies on aggressive maneuvering. Whittaker understood this at a level that bordered on instinct. He could visualize the 3-dimensional geometry of an attack: torpedo running time, target movement, escort patrol patterns, escape routes. He could calculate in his head what other officers needed plotting boards to determine, and critically, he could wait. He could observe for hours, tracking a target, while his crew fidgeted and his officers wondered if he would ever give the order to fire. Patience is not a dramatic virtue. It does not photograph well. It does not make for exciting patrol reports. But in submarine warfare, patience preserves boats, and boats that survive complete more patrols, and patrols completed to accumulate kills. The USS Flasher conducts one more war patrol after her record-setting 6th patrol. By this time, targets in the Pacific are becoming scarce. The Japanese merchant marine has been functionally destroyed. Submarines that once found rich hunting grounds now cruise for days without making contact. The Flasher's 7th patrol results in one confirmed kill and returns to Pearl Harbor in April of 1945. The war ends 4 months later. Commander Whittaker is reassigned to shore duty. The Flasher was decommissioned on May 16, 1946. Her hull number struck from the Naval Register. She spends the next 17 years in mothballs before being sold for scrap in 1963. She is dismantled at a facility in California, her steel recycled, her identity erased except for the records and the memories of men who served aboard her. Whittaker retired from the Navy in 1952 with the rank of captain. He returns to civilian life, works as an engineer, raises a family, and rarely discusses his wartime service. In the few interviews he gives to naval historians, he consistently deflects credit, insisting that any success the Flasher achieved was due to the crew's competence and the quality of American submarines, not to any particular genius on his part. This modesty is sincere, but it obscures an important truth. Submarine warfare in World War II was ultimately won not by the boats themselves, but by the officers who commanded them. The same Gato-class submarine could be highly successful under one commander and merely adequate under another. The technology mattered, certainly. The Mark 14 torpedoes problems cost American submarines hundreds of missed opportunities. But once the torpedo problems were solved, the determining factor became the man standing at the periscope, making decisions based on incomplete information while under extraordinary stress. Whittaker made those decisions through a combination of mathematical precision and psychological insight. He understood not just the physics of submarine warfare, but the psychology of his enemy. He knew that Japanese merchant captains would always turn away from a periscope sighting. He knew that Japanese destroyers followed predictable search patterns. He knew that Japanese convoy routes followed schedules that could be exploited. And he knew something else that some of his more aggressive contemporaries did not fully appreciate. The enemy was also intelligent, also adaptive, also learning from each encounter. The tactics that worked in 1943 would get you killed in 1945 if you did not evolve with the changing conditions. The cost of this learning curve was measured in submarines that never returned from patrol. Of the 288 United States submarines that conducted war patrols in the Pacific, 52 were lost with all hands. The submarine service suffered the highest casualty rate of any branch of the American military. Approximately 22% of submariners who served in the Pacific died in action. The USS Flasher never lost a man to enemy action during her entire service. This statistic is as remarkable as her kill total, because submarine warfare offered limited margin for error. One torpedo that runs circular and comes back at you, one depth charge that lands close enough, one ramming attempt that succeeds instead of fails. Any of these could have erased the Flasher and her crew from history. That none of these occurred is partly luck, but it is also the result of decision-making that prioritized survival as highly as aggression. Whittaker understood that dead crews sink no ships. The most successful submarine is not the one that achieves the most kills on a single patrol, but the one that completes the most patrols. This is the part of submarine warfare that rarely appears in popular accounts. The tedium, the calculation, the 1,000 small decisions that determine whether you live or die. The decision to wait 3 more minutes before firing, the decision to dive 50 feet deeper than doctrine recommends, the decision to transmit a survivor position in clear, knowing it reveals your location, because some obligations transcend tactical advantage. These decisions do not make for dramatic cinema. They are not the substance of heroic narratives. They are simply the reality of how wars are actually won, through competence, discipline, and the kind of moral clarity that recognizes the difference between necessary killing and cruelty. The legacy of the USS Flasher exists today primarily in specialized military history and in the collective memory of the submarine service. Every officer who attends submarine school studies Whitaker's patrol reports, though few recognize his name. His tactics have been absorbed into doctrine, his innovations now considered standard procedure. The close approach, the patient tracking, the emphasis on geometric precision over aggressive boldness, these have become the unmarked foundation of modern submarine warfare. There is no memorial to the Flasher except for a brass plaque in the Submarine Museum in Groton, Connecticut. There is no monument to Commander Whitaker except for his entry in the Naval Academy's Register of Distinguished Graduates. The men who served aboard the Flasher are mostly gone now, their memories fading with each passing year. What remains is the record itself. 21 confirmed ships sunk, over 100,000 tons of enemy shipping destroyed, 6 war patrols completed without a single American casualty, 1 submarine, doing what submarines are designed to do, with a level of efficiency that bordered on the unbelievable. The Japanese could not believe it. Their naval intelligence assessed the Flasher's patrol reports and concluded they must be false or exaggerated. No single submarine could achieve such results. It had to be multiple boats, coordinated attacks, probably American propaganda, inflating numbers for morale purposes. They were wrong. It was 1 boat, 80 men. A commander with wire-rimmed glasses who understood that warfare at its core is applied at mathematics. That patience is not cowardice but geometry. That the submarine which waits for the perfect shot will, over time, sink more ships than the submarine that fires at every opportunity. In the end, the story of the USS Flasher is not really about a submarine at all. It is about the transformation of warfare into science, about the application of mathematical precision to the ancient human activity of organized killing. It is about men learning to hunt other men with the cold efficiency of predators, while somehow maintaining enough humanity to transmit survivor positions after the killing is done. It is about the strange mathematics of submarine warfare, where success is measured in tons, sunk and patrols survived, where 1 boat operating with ruthless efficiency can achieve results that seem impossible, until you examine the geometry and realize that impossibility was always just a failure of imagination. The USS Flasher proved that 1 submarine, properly commanded, could sink what seemed like an entire fleet, not through heroics, not through luck, through patience, precision, and the kind of methodical competence that transforms killing into an engineering problem. The Japanese Navy learned this lesson slowly, expensively, 1 sinking at a time. By the time they fully understood what they were facing, the war was already lost. The mathematics had already been done. The equation had already been solved. 1 submarine equals 40-some ships. 1 commander equals the disruption of an empire's supply lines. 1 patrol equals the vindication of patience over aggression. These are the equations that won the Pacific War, written not on paper but in the cold water of the South China Sea, where the USS Flasher spent 12 months teaching the Japanese Navy a lesson in applied mathematics that they never forgot. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.